Hello everyone, today we're going to be solving the latest paper as of today's date, which is March 2026. This paper does not have a mark scheme, so I'll be solving all the questions and I'll be explaining why each answer is the way it is. Let's start. The first question says, growth is a characteristic feature of living organisms. Which process provides the energy for growth? Is it excretion? No, excretion is the process by which the organism removes substances in excess of requirements and waste products of metabolism, so it cannot be excretion. Movement, I don't think I need to explain why. Movement is not what provides energy. Respiration is the correct answer. We'll get back to it in a second, but sensitivity is also not the correct answer. Why is respiration the correct answer? Respiration is the chemical reactions inside cells that release energy from metabolism, and therefore it is the correct answer. The diagram shows an arthropod with two pairs of antennae. Which group of arthropods has two pairs of antennae? Arachnids have no antennae, so it cannot be arachnids. Insects have one pair of antennae. Same with myropods, so they cannot be the correct answer. So the only correct answer is B. The diagram shows a palisade mesophyll cell from a green leaf. In which labeled part does photosynthesis occur, and where are chromosomes found? Let's answer these questions. Where photosynthesis occurs, we know that photosynthesis occurs in structures called the chloroplasts. And these structures contain chlorophyll, and this is why they can carry out photosynthesis. The chromosomes are found in the nucleus, and the chromosomes are the form of storage of DNA. And the chromosomes are found inside the nucleus. Chloroplast is, let's find a chloroplast. Chloroplast is Y, and the nucleus is W. Where photosynthesis occurs, that'll be Y, so A and B are wrong. And where chromosomes are found, that is W, so the only correct answer is D. The diagram shows images of 4 organisms. The magnification and the body length of each image is shown. Which organism has the longest actual body length? To calculate the actual and image length of any specimen, we use this formula. It's called I am. That's how I like to memorize it, I am. Where I stands for image, A stands for actual, and M stands for magnification. And these are the sizes. So which organism has the longest actual body length? And here they give us the image length. So you don't actually need to get your ruler and start measuring yourself. They already gave it for you. So this is 60 millimeters and the magnification is 2. So let's put that into our formula. So that'll be 60 for the image, which is equal to the actual size, which we're trying to find, and the magnification, which is 2. So 60 is equal to 2A. So A is equal to 30 millimeter. And this is the size of the first one, 30 millimeter. For B, it's going to be the same thing. I'm just going to divide the image size by the magnification, so it's going to be 100 divided by 200. That's going to be half a millimeter. This one is going to be 28 divided by 1, so this is 28 millimeters. And 75 divided by 1.5 is 50 millimeters. As we can see, 30, 0.5, 28, and 50. 50 is the biggest number, so the correct answer is D, because they said which organism has the longest actual body length. A plant cell was immersed in a concentrated salt solution and became plasmolysed. Which diagram shows a plasmolysed cell? We know that plasmolysed cells are cells where the cell membrane has been dissociated from the cell wall because the cell has shrunk so much as it lost so much water, and obviously the vacuole has also shrunk. So it cannot be B because B is swollen. Sorry. It cannot be B as B is swollen, and it cannot be C as C is normal. A is slightly shrunk, but we can see that the cell membrane has not dissociated from the cell wall, so it's not A. Therefore, the only correct answer is D, where the cell membrane has dissociated from the cell wall, and there's actually a little bit of a cavity in here. And the reason why the cell membrane shrinks so much is because the cytoplasm itself contains water, not just the vacuole. So the whole cell loses water, and it shrinks in size so much that the cell membrane actually gets or moves far or moves away from the cell wall. What is an example of active transport? Absorption of nitrate ions from the soil. This is correct. The reason, the root hair cells have a higher concentration of nitrate ions inside of them than outside. So the nitrate ions have to move against the concentration gradient through protein carriers using energy from respiration in the process of active transport. Evaporation of water from leaf mesophyll cells, that is not correct. That is an example of diffusion, as the water vapor diffuses out of the stomata into the surrounding atmosphere. Movement of oxygen from an alveolus into a blood capillary, that is also an example of diffusion. Movement of water from the small intestine into the blood, that is an example of osmosis, so the only correct answer is A. Which biological molecule is shown in a diagram? We can easily tell that this is definitely not cellulose. Cellulose is made of glucose molecules, not protein, definitely not starch. Protein has a specific structure. I don't really think you're required to know the structure of protein, and starch is definitely not. DNA, and the reason we could tell it's DNA is because it has these bases, these chemicals, which have these letters T, A, G, and C. So it's DNA. The graph shows the activity of an enzyme. What does the graph show about the activity of this enzyme? Let's first look at the graph. Look at the x-axis. It says pH, and the y-axis says enzyme activity. So we're studying the changes in enzyme activity as pH increases, as we go from left to right. So the options say, it is destroyed by high temperatures. No, it's not really. Nothing about temperature is here in the graph. It is most active in acidic conditions. Let's see. the enzyme activity increases from around 0 pH up to a maximum at around 3 or 4, and then drops down to a minimum, or again back to 0 at pH equals 7. So yes, it is most active in acidic conditions, and this is because between 0 and 7, this is acidic, and between 7 and 14, the conditions are known as alkaline. It is most active in alkaline conditions, of course not. It is most active in acidic conditions. It is unaffected by pH, of course not. We can see that the relationship here shows that there's an increase and a decrease as pH increases, so it is definitely affected by pH. A student investigated the rate of photosynthesis in tomato plants. The graph shows the results. Let's look at the graph. On the x-axis, we have the light intensity, and on the y-axis, we have the rate of photosynthesis. As the light intensity increases, we are studying the changes in the rate of photosynthesis. For the first part, the ascending limb of the graph, as light intensity increased, the rate of photosynthesis increased, and then it leveled off at a certain point. They said, which factor does the graph indicate is the limiting factor of photosynthesis at x? At point x, we could see that any further increase in light intensity was resulting in an increase in rate of photosynthesis, and therefore the only limiting factor here was light intensity. As when we increased the light intensity, the plant responded by increasing the rate of photosynthesis, so the only correct answer here is light intensity. It cannot be carbon dioxide concentration or oxygen concentration, because that has nothing to do with photosynthesis, and it definitely cannot be temperature. Which row shows the uses of some carbohydrates in plants? Glucose, is it used for cell walls? That is not correct. Cellulose is used for cell walls. Glucose, is it used as an energy storage? No, the correct answer is starch. Glucose, is it used for respiration? Yes. Starch, energy storage? Absolutely. And starch is formed of glucose. Sucrose for transport? Absolutely right. Glucose, so this is the correct answer. C is the correct answer. Let's see why D is wrong. Glucose for transport? No, the transport form of glucose or carbohydrates in plants is sucrose. So the answer is C. A child decided to eat only meat, oily fish, cheese and bread, and drink only water. Which nutrient would be in low levels in this diet? Is it calcium? Well, let's go over each of the nutrients and, see the food and check for ourselves. Calcium, only meat. There's no calcium in meat. Oily fish, no, not much. Cheese, yes, that's a dairy product, and therefore calcium is not going to be deficient, or it's not going to be in low levels. Iron is found in plentiful amounts in meat, especially red meat, so iron is going to be found. Vitamin C, meat, not really. Oily fish, cheese, bread, no. Drink only water. So they're probably going to have deficiency of vitamin C, resulting in scurvy, and they probably have vitamin C deficiency. Vitamin D doesn't really depend on the diet because our bodies synthesize it, and it gets activated by sun rays. So no, vitamin D doesn't really have to do much with the diet, so it will probably not be deficient. So the only deficient nutrient is going to be vitamin C. Where in the alimentary canal do the enzymes pepsin, trypsin, and maltase act? Pepsin, I like to think of pepsin as being read as Pepsi, and Pepsi is sour, therefore it is acidic. Which part of our body is sour or acidic? That is the stomach, because of the hydrochloric acid. And the hydrochloric acid provides optimum pH for the pepsin enzyme. So options A and B cannot be correct, because pepsin is found in the stomach. So we're between C and D. Trypsin, they said it's found in the small intestine. That is correct for both options. Maltase, it is found in the small intestine, specifically is produced by the epithelial cells of villi, or the small intestines. And therefore, that is the correct answer. Maltase is not found in the mouth. The function of maltase is to break down maltose sugar into glucose, which is then absorbed in the intestines. A decrease in which factor normally causes transpiration to increase? Is it humidity? Humidity refers to the concentration of water vapor outside of the plant leaf. If you decrease it, you're kind of creating a better concentration gradient, and therefore the rate of transpiration will increase, and so this answer is correct. Light intensity. As you increase light intensity, you're kind of changing just photosynthesis, not exactly anything to do with transpiration, therefore that is wrong. Number of stomata. Number of stomata, as you decrease the number of stomata, you are getting less areas for the water vapor to diffuse out of, and therefore you are actually decreasing the rate of transpiration, and therefore this answer is incorrect. Temperature, as you decrease the temperature, there is less kinetic energy of the water vapor, therefore the rate of diffusion will actually drop, so transpiration will decrease, and the only correct answer here then is humidity. As we decrease humidity, the concentration of water vapor molecules outside will actually drop, and therefore there will be a steeper concentration gradient and a higher rate of diffusion. What is an advantage of a double circulatory system in mammals? Blood can flow down the body on the left and up the body on the right. Blood can flow more slowly along the circulatory system. Blood pressure stays the same throughout the circulatory system. Oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood are kept separate. This is the correct answer, and that is D. Atria and ventricles are chambers in the heart. Which statements describe the relative thickness of the muscle walls of these chambers? Before we do that, I want you to realize that the atria, which are the upper chambers in the heart, their only function is to collect the blood as it returns back to the heart. So they act as blood reservoirs or blood storage. Therefore, they don't really need to have thick walls, as they don't really do much pumping. Yes, they do contract, but their only contraction, the contraction they do is to just send a small amount of blood into the ventricles. The ventricles are the thicker parts of the heart, and they're responsible for pumping the blood into all the body organs, and therefore they have to be much, much thicker. The walls of the atria are thicker than the walls of the ventricles. This is incorrect. The walls of the ventricles are thicker than the walls of the atria. That is absolutely correct. Just the opposite of the first one. The wall of the left ventricle is thicker than the wall of the right ventricle. That is absolutely correct. And the reason behind that is the left side of the heart pumps blood to all the body organs. So not just the lungs as the right side does. The right side pumps the blood to the lungs. So the wall of the right ventricle is thicker than the wall of the left ventricle. This is just the opposite and it's wrong. Therefore, the only correct answers are 2 and 3. Which row shows white blood cells? Which row shows how white blood cells help to defend the body against pathogens? Function, antibody production. That is definitely a function of white blood cells. So that's correct. So A and B are definitely wrong. Blood clotting, no, white blood cells do not perform blood clotting. That is the function of platelets. So C is, or D is incorrect. So therefore the only correct answer is C. Phagocytosis, that is correct because phagocytes engulf pathogens in the process of phagocytosis. The cholera bacterium produces a toxin that causes the secretion of chloride ions into the small intestines. Which statement describes the consequence of this? The water potential in the small intestine decreases, so water moves into the small intestines. This is correct, but let's actually draw it out. So this is the lumen of the small intestine, and let's say this is the cholera bacterium. It'll secrete a toxin that will lead to the secretion of chloride ions into the small intestines. So the chloride ions will actually be brought here into the lumen of the small intestine. And because chloride ions are salts, they're going to dissolve in there, and they are going to reduce the potential of water to move. So they're going to kind of hold the water molecules in place. What that does is that reduces the water potential. And we know that the water moves from a region of high water potential to a region of low water potential through the process of osmosis. So the water potential in the small intestine does decrease, and this is because of the chloride ions being more inside, and so the water will move into the small intestines. Let's see the other options. The water potential in the small intestines decreases. This is correct. So water moves out of the small intestines. Why would it move out if the potential there is less? The potential in the small intestines increases, so water moves into the small intestines. That is counterintuitive. The water potential in the small intestines increases, so water moves out of the small intestines. Again, the second part is correct, but the first part is not correct. Which cells protect the lungs from pathogens by secreting mucus? Is it ciliated cells? Ciliated cells are cells with hair-like projections, so it's not ciliated cells. Goblet cells. Goblet cells are cells that literally look like a goblet, which is a cup, and they contain mucus, and that is the correct answer, so it's goblet cells. Lymphocytes. No, lymphocytes produce antibodies. Memory cells. Memory cells are just a type of lymphocytes. Which row describes anaerobic respiration in humans? Carbon dioxide. Does anaerobic respiration produce carbon dioxide in humans? Anaerobic respiration produces lactic acid, therefore carbon dioxide is not produced, so the answers are not A and B, it is either C or D. Oxygen needed, it is called anaerobic respiration, which means does not involve air, and therefore it does not need oxygen, so the correct answer is D. The amount of energy released compared to aerobic respiration is definitely low, and that is the correct answer, which is D. Which chemical reaction is catalyzed by maltase? Maltase converts maltose into 2 molecules of glucose, and that is B. Glycogen into glucose and maltose, that is incorrect. And just to give you a quick tip, the name of the enzyme usually has what substrate it acts on. So maltose to starch, no, that is a larger molecule, not a smaller molecule, and we don't really make starch out of maltose using the enzyme maltase. Starch into glucose and maltose, no, of course not. That is just very far off. So maltose into glucose plus glucose, and maltose is formed of 2 glucose molecules like we do know. The table shows the composition of blood entering and leaving the kidneys and liver. Which row is incorrect? Highest concentration of urea in the blood, lowest concentration of urea in the blood. We should know that the urea is made in the liver. And once it's made in the liver, it circulates the body to go to the kidneys. So once it leaves the kidneys, once the blood leaves the kidneys, it goes back to the liver to restock on urea and so on. So once the blood leaves the liver, the concentration of urea is at its highest. And once it enters the kidneys, the concentration of urea is at its lowest. Then it goes back to the liver, increases again, and so on, like a cycle. Highest concentration of urea in the blood. Is it going to be entering the kidneys? Yes, of course, definitely entering the kidneys, not leaving the kidneys because the kidneys are the filters. Lowest concentration of urea in the blood. Is it leaving the liver? Of course not. That is the same as entering the kidneys. And so the only correct answer is entering the liver after it's left the kidneys going back to the liver, so the correct answer is B. A person runs on a hot day. Which statement describes the flow of blood through the arterioles supplying the surface of the skin? When it's a hot day, the body tends to get hot. Therefore, the body will try to get rid of that hotness. And it'll do that by increasing the proximity of the blood to the surface of the skin so that more radiation will be lost, therefore more heat loss, and the body cools down faster. So it'll only do that by increasing the diameter of the blood vessel so more blood will flow to the surface of the skin. So increasing the diameter is the process known as vasodilation, not vasoconstriction, so A and B are incorrect. When we dilate the blood vessel, the amount of blood flowing through the arterioles to supply the surface of the skin increases, so the correct answer is not C, because here they say decrease, it's D, it increases. A plant shoot was placed on its side in the dark, and this is the diagram. Which row shows the expected changes as the shoot grows in these conditions? Side showing increased concentration of auxin. They said it was placed on its side in the dark. Because it was placed on its side in the dark, we're not really studying the effect of light, we're rather studying the effect of gravity. And because gravity pulls the auxin downwards, the auxin molecules will actually accumulate at the lower side of the plant shoot. So the auxin will be showing higher concentration at the lower surface, or at the lower side. Side showing increased cell elongation, definitely the lower side because it has the higher concentration of auxin, and we know that auxin causes increased cell elongation. Which row shows the speed of action and duration of effect for the type of control? On the left, we have the type of control, and on the right, we have the speed of action and duration of effect. Hormonal. Is the speed of action fast? No. The speed of action is slow because the hormones are chemicals that travel in the blood. And they bind to receptors on the cells, and they cause changes to the cells, and these changes are usually much slower than the changes caused by the neurons or the nervous system. Hormonal. Type of control, hormonal. Speed of action, slow. Duration of effect, short. That is incorrect. Though because the speed of action is slow, or although the speed of action is slow, the duration of effect for hormones is actually long, much longer than the nervous effect. Type of control, nervous. Speed of action, fast. That is correct. Duration of effect, short. Yes, that is also correct. Type of control, nervous. Speed of action, slow. No, speed of action is very fast for the nervous response. Which statement describes an advantage of using asexual reproduction in crop products? All offspring inherit the desired characteristic. This is absolutely correct. If a plant has a desired characteristic, for example, height or something like this, the offspring will all inherit that characteristic because asexual reproduction produces genetically identical offspring. And because they're identical, they will all have those exact same features without any change. Germination occurs quickly. That has nothing to do with asexual reproduction. There is increased variation within the crop species because asexual reproduction produces identical offspring. The offspring will not have any kind of variation within them, so this is wrong. The production of adult plants is slower. That is actually also wrong because asexual reproduction happens very, very quickly and doesn't really need much energy or doesn't need a partner or doesn't need the plant to grow from just being a seed up to being an adult. So the producing an adult is much more energy and time consuming in sexual reproduction than in asexual reproduction. Therefore, the correct answer is A. The diagram shows the relative concentration of two hormones that are involved in controlling the human menstrual cycle. Which hormone is represented by X? And they gave us on the x-axis the time in days, and on the y-axis the concentration of hormones. So we're studying the changes in the concentration of hormone as time increases. This is the menstrual cycle hormone graph, and if we were to look at our original graph, we'll see that the only hormone that peaks at around day 14 and reaches this highest maximum point as compared to every other hormone is LH hormone. So the correct answer is LH. How will the composition of a pregnant woman's blood change as it passes through the placenta? The placenta is, think of it as this exchange station between the mother and the baby. So this is the mother. Her blood passes through the placenta, and it goes to the baby. They said concentration of dissolved oxygen. The blood of the mother has a high concentration of dissolved oxygen to carry it to her baby, since the baby cannot breathe for its own, therefore cannot source its own oxygen. So as the blood travels through the placenta, it'll get consumed, or the oxygen in it will get consumed by the blood of the baby. Well, the oxygen will diffuse into the blood of the baby, and therefore the concentration of the dissolved oxygen in the pregnant woman's blood will actually decrease, therefore C and D are incorrect. The concentration of urea. Urea is the waste product produced by the baby, and the baby will load that urea onto the mother's blood as it passes through the placenta. It is illogical for the concentration of urea in the mother's blood to decrease as it passes through the placenta, because that will mean that the urea in the mother's blood will be actually released onto the baby, which doesn't make any sense. Why would why would that happen? Why would we do that? We're trying to remove the waste products from the baby onto the mother and not vice versa. The concentration of urea increases as the baby gives off the urea to his mother, and therefore the only correct answer is B. The diagram shows some stages of protein synthesis. What is X? Let's look at the diagram. So this is a section of the nucleus. We can clearly see that this is a double-stranded DNA molecule. It is being unzipped, and a copy of it is being made. This copy is known as mRNA. It travels outside of the nucleus through nuclear pores into the cytoplasm, and this is X. So they're saying what is X? X, as we just said, is the length of mRNA. It cannot be a length of DNA because this is DNA. It cannot be a sequence of amino acids because this is the sequence of amino acids, and it cannot be a sequence of genes because the sequence of genes is just a length of DNA. A cell divides by mitosis every 3 hours and 24 minutes. How long will it take to produce 8 new cells from this original cell? Well, let's see. They said a cell, so they're starting out with one cell. And they said it divides every 3 hours and 24 minutes. So in 3 hours and 24 minutes, it's going to divide into 2 new cells. And then each of these cells after 2 hours or 3 hours and 24 minutes will divide into 2 cells of their own. And obviously all these cells are identical because mitosis produces genetically identical daughter cells. Each of these cells will also divide into a cell of their own. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cells. How many divisions did that take? That took 3 divisions, so that'll be 3 times 3 hours and 24 minutes. But we can see that the answers are only found in minutes. Therefore, we have to convert that 3 hours and 24 minutes into minutes only. So to convert 3 hours and 24 minutes, we're going to multiply the 3 hours by the amount of minutes in them. So 3 times 60, that'll be 180. 180 plus 24, that'll be 204. So 204 multiplied by the number of divisions, which is 1, 2, 3, that'll be 612 minutes. So the correct answer is B. Moving on to question 30, this is the most difficult question in this whole exam paper, and honestly one of the most difficult questions I've seen ever show up in paper 2. So if you can ace this one, I can guarantee you'll do very, very well in the rest of the syllabus. The allele for short hair in cats is recessive, and the allele for long hair in cats is dominant. The word allele means an alternative form of a gene. For short hair in cats is recessive. Recessive means that the allele will only express its phenotype, which is the visible characteristic, if the 2 copies that the cat has for that specific gene are both recessive, which means homozygous. You know that the cat will inherit 1 copy from the father and another copy of the same gene from the mother. So both of these copies have to be recessive in order for it to be expressed. The allele for long hair in cats is dominant, and dominant means that it can be expressed in either form. So it could be heterozygous or homozygous. It does not care, it is dominant. The pedigree diagram shows the inheritance of hair length in a family of cats. And this is the diagram, and they gave us a key. Female cat with long hair and male cat with long hair will both have the same genotypes of either H capital, where it is homozygous dominant, or H capital, H small. Female cats with short hair and male cats with short hair would only have 1 genotype of H small, because it's homozygous, and recessive only get expressed in homozygous form. Now let's identify the genotype of each of the members, and so that we can answer the question. And the question says, how many cats must be heterozygous for hair length? Is it 4, 5, 6, or 7? Let's count. Looking at the key, the first one is a male cat with short hair, and that must have the genotype of H small, They got married to a female cat with long hair, so H capital, H small, or H capital, H capital. Their offspring was an H small, a male cat with short hair. Since they are an H small, they certainly got a copy, one from their mother, or one from their father and one from their mother. The mother must be H capital, H small, because if she was H capital, then the son would have never had short hair. So the mother must be H capital, H small, and this is the first confirmed heterozygous member in the pedigree diagram. So this is number 1. This H small male cat with short hair got married to yet another member. And again, we don't know if she's H capital, H small, or H capital, H capital. We only know from their offspring. And this is giving it away. They gave birth to a member with H small, so the same case as before, the mother must be H capital, H small. This has been confirmed as the second member of the heterozygous group. Since they gave birth to this H small, that daughter got wed with either, again, H capital, H small, or H capital male, and they gave birth to a child. That child happened to be a long-haired female cat. So she could be either H capital, H small, or H capital, H capital. But she has to be H capital, H small. You know why? Because her mother is H small. And if her dad is either H capital, H small, or H capital, she definitely inherited the H capital from her dad, and she will 100% inherit an H small from her mother. She is an H capital, H small, and this is the third heterozygous confirmed member in this group. Okay, let's move on to the second son. The son has long hair, and he is a male. The parents are H capital, H small, and H small. Since the mother, same situation as here, since the mother is an H small, their son must be an H capital, H small. So this is the fourth confirmed member. And since this is also the case, and this is their daughter, then this is the fifth confirmed member, the fifth H capital, H small. She was wed with a male, and they gave birth to a daughter who was homozygous recessive, H small, which means she must have got that other H from her dad, and since her dad is dominant, her dad must be H capital, H small, and this is the fifth, this is the sixth confirmed member of the group. So the correct answer is C, which is 6 members. This is a bit of a tough question. It's honestly one of the most difficult questions I've seen ever show up in paper 2. So if you could solve this, really, really good job. You're doing amazing. Which row shows the factors that contribute to the variation in a population of animals? Gamete formation. Yes, the process of gamete formation increases the variation within the population. Random change in DNA base sequence, or in other terms, mutation, it is the main drive of evolution. Random fertilization, of course, yes, because that increases the variety, as in you're breeding different members of the same population with one another, so you're not getting the exact same copies. Random mating, same as random fertilization, but in animals, so the correct answer is A. All of them are correct. Different organisms have different adaptive features. For example, the anthers of wind-pollinated flowering plants have long filaments, which is true of this adaptive feature. Filament length is not affected by genes. That is wrong. Every feature in an organism is affected by genes and also by the environment. It gives the plant an advantage in all environments. It does give a plant an advantage, but it doesn't necessarily give it an advantage in all environments. There might be an environment where that increased anther length actually is detrimental. For example, it could draw predators, which is not good. But in a certain environment, it's actually more beneficial. Longer filaments attract more insects. It makes the plant more likely to reproduce. Yes, this is correct, because they said that the anthers of wind-pollinated flowers have long filaments, and the filaments are the supporting strands that hold the anthers, and the anthers contain the male gametes. Therefore, it does increase the likelihood of reproduction. In the nitrogen cycle, bacteria convert ammonia to nitrate ions. What is the name of this process? Is it deamination? Nope. Is it denitrification? Nope. Is it nitrification? Yes. Is it nitrogen fixation? Nope. So the only correct answer is C. A food chain has a pyramid of numbers shown. Very small number of producers, relatively. Very large number of herbivorous insects, and a smaller number in carnivorous insects. What is the pyramid of biomass of the same food chain? The pyramid of number is concerned with the number or the size of the population, and the pyramid of biomass is concerned with the size or the amount of organic matter that is found within each group. So the biomass, or the pyramid of biomass, usually has a much wider base and decreases as we go up the pyramid. So the only correct answer here is A, but let me actually show you why. The number of producers is usually small. For example, you can have just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trees, and these would be the producers, and their number is small. But since they are very, very large trees, they take up a very large portion of the biomass graph, or the biomass pyramid. And the thing about this is, because the herbivorous insects are very small and they're found in very large amounts, in the pyramid of numbers, you'll see them actually more than the producers. But since the producers are much larger and they contain more organic matter, they are actually much larger in the biomass pyramid. Which factor could result in the death phase of a sigmoid population growth curve? Absence of limiting factors? No, that does not cause death. Abundance of food? Same as A. Decrease in competition for space? That is also a factor that favors the growth. Increase in predators, yes, predation will increase the rate of death. What is an effect of untreated sewage on aquatic organisms? Let me tell you what happens with aquatic organisms and the effect of untreated sewage. The untreated sewage is released onto lakes and water bodies, and these water bodies contain plants underneath. So this is the lake, and they have plants here. These plants are just living as normal. They are carrying out respiration, photosynthesis, all these funny processes. So what happens is, when you increase the untreated sewage, that untreated sewage has so many nutrients, and those nutrients will actually promote the growth of other producers. So not just the plants here, it will promote the growth of other producers such as algae. Now the algae will grow on the surface of the water, and they will block any sunlight coming into the water. So when they block the sunlight, the plants inside will actually start dying. And once they start dying, they decompose. And you know what else happens? Because the nitrates increased in such fast amounts, and the growth here was so fast, at some point, the nitrate ions, or the nutrients in general, will actually drop sharply, and they will not be enough to sustain all these producers or algae that are using it for growth. And so also these algae will die. And once they die, alongside the plants that died down here, a lot of decomposers will actually go ahead and decompose them. And in order to decompose them, they are growing and they're using energy, and so they need to produce their energy from the process of respiration. And the process of respiration consumes a very large amount of oxygen because of their sheer number in the lake. And the number, or the concentration of oxygen, will actually drop, and the water will be completely dead. It has no oxygen, no light, no this, no that, and the fish inside will die because of two reasons. First of all, they don't have any food because the plants here died, and second of all, the amount of oxygen inside is completely depleted, and so they cannot even carry out respiration of their own, so they cannot produce energy, and the biodiversity in turn decreases because you've dropped the number of plants and you've dropped the number of animals, in this case the fish, and so the biodiversity is dropped. What is an effect of untreated sewage on aquatic organisms? Does it decrease decomposition? Actually, the opposite, it increases it. Decreased nitrate ion concentration? No, actually increased. Increased biodiversity? Nope, decreased biodiversity because we're killing the members. Increased growth of producers? Yes, absolutely, the growth of algae, and they block the sunlight. The Amur leopard is one of the rarest cats in the world from 2007 to 2023. The number of Amur leopards increased from 27 to 115. What is the percentage increase in Amur leopards from 2007 to 2023? In order to calculate the percentage increase, we have to do the change in the two values divided by the original values multiplied by 100. So that'll be the new value, which is 115, minus the original value, which is 27, divided by the original value, which is 27, multiplied by 100. Let's calculate that. 115 minus 27 divided by 27 multiplied by 100. That'll give us an answer of 325.9, which here rounded up to three significant figures is 326. So the answer is C. Deforestation can have a negative impact on the environment. Which statement about the negative impact of deforestation is correct? It decreases the levels of carbon dioxide, which can lead to reduced rates of photosynthesis. No, that's not correct. Deforestation actually cuts down trees, so you're kind of increasing the levels of carbon dioxide in two ways. First of all, the dead trees themselves will begin to decompose and release carbon dioxide. And since you have less trees or less plants carrying out photosynthesis in general, you're kind of reducing the amount of carbon dioxide consumed, and therefore you are increasing carbon dioxide. So no, it does not decrease the levels of carbon dioxide. It decreases the amount of water flowing in local rivers, so there is less flooding. That is also actually the opposite. The effect of forests and trees is actually helping towards prevention of flooding because what it does is that it holds the soil together and it also sucks up the water. So when you're removing the trees, you're not just decreasing the amount of water, you're actually increasing it in local rivers, and therefore you're increasing the likelihood of flooding. It leads to soil loss, so there is less fertile soil for the growth of crops in the area. Soil loss, that is correct. Less fertile soil for the growth of crops in the area, that is also correct. So this is definitely a negative impact of deforestation. And the soil loss happens because the plant or the tree roots actually penetrate deeply into the soil and kind of hold together like hands holding together a piece of clay. And that makes it much less likely to erode and increases its fertility. If you have a soil that is very easily eroded by factors like wind and water, then that soil is definitely not fertile. It provides less land for the extraction of natural resources. That is actually a positive impact, and that is one of the main reasons why deforestation occurs. So it is definitely an incorrect answer as regards negative impact. The table shows the area of new forest planted in one country from 2017 to 2021. What can be concluded from the data? The year is 2017 up to 2021, and the area of new forest planted in kilometers increasing from 6,500 down to or up to 13,300 in 2021. From 2017 to 2021, the area of new forest planted increased each year, right? They didn't just say increased overall, they said increased each year. Let's see, 6,500 up to 9,000. Yes, that's an increase, so this is correct here. 9,000 to 13,500, that's an increase, another increase. But here's actually not an increase, it's a drop, so A cannot be correct. The greatest area of new forest planted was in 2019. It was 13,500, but in 2020 it was 13,700, so no, that's not correct. The mean area of new forest planted each year was 11,200, and that we can confirm once we calculate, but let's see the last option. The percentage increase in area of new forest planted from 2017 to 2021 was 51%. Let's roughly calculate it. 6,500, a 50% increase in that would be to around, let's say roughly 10K. It cannot get to 13,300, so no, D is not the correct answer, and therefore C is the correct answer, but let's actually do the math, and let me show you how you calculate the mean. To calculate the mean, we have to add up the total area, so we'll do 6,500 plus 9,000 plus 13,500 plus 13,700 plus 13,300 and divide by the total number of years, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that'll be 11,200, and that is the correct answer, which is D. What is the function of an enzyme used in genetic modification? DNA ligase and restriction enzyme. For DNA ligase, they said isolate the DNA of a human gene. No, ligase ligates the DNA or kind of acts like glue. DNA ligase inserts human DNA into bacterial DNA. That is correct. Restriction enzyme inserts recombinant plasmid DNA into bacteria. That is not the function of this enzyme. Restriction enzyme isolates the recombinant plasmid DNA. Also incorrect, because restriction enzyme actually isolates the DNA of a human gene. And so the only correct answer here is B. This was the whole paper. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to watch more videos as regards IGCSE Biology Cambridge, make sure to follow and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and I will see you on the next one.